is finished, having its roots cut off, when a spattle a tree with a pahar, the branches and leaves, even like his life is Lord Vishnu. The Prasaha, the demigods. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada. Translation: starting the falls down. Branches and twigs automatically dry up. Similarly, for the Lord Vishnu, the life and soul, the source of their life and wither away. The gods and is here explained. The demigods always follow the instructions of the personality of Godhead. Simply store or kill him. Nevertheless, sometimes we very much appreciate the demigods upon the mercy of the Lord. This is entirely constituted gods by the leads. ज्ञानाञ्जनेशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे केश शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे. My dear Lord, please help us all to understand your unparalleled position, and may that transform our disposition towards you. Hare Krishna. What shall I with all of you today? Today we will be discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam and discussing the seventh canto. This is the of Lord Nrsimhadev. He appears executions that are being done by Hiranyakashipu described. So part of the description what is going on is this particular section is described. So when I in Bhagavatam class, I taught you a framework called truth. Look at the context, look at some insights, look at some. Both lost. And then look at some takeaways. The second that works our consciousness with respect to the Bhagavatam. So in the context is this is the seventh canto. You can see the important cantos. And can be respected. If we talk from this perspective, the tenth canto have large number of verses. The tenth canto is almost one third of the entire Bhagavatam. So we are not halfway through. But broadly, as the Bhagavatam is being forward, it's not just a list of stories that are being told. There are many stories being told. Stories that is an emotion. The emotion is understanding of the value Dedication of the so understanding of the Guru will have a summit and where more and more so the manifestation of the divine. This Krishna. So many loving relationships is Rasaraj. As we move towards that, we see initially God is described as the Bhagavatam starts off on the second canto. First canto is more or less setting on the stage. That how does Parikshit Maharaj come to a place where he will Bhagavatam? So if we start with the second canto, then we have the Virat, and is primarily described. And the primary conception of God that is described in the Avtara list is given. The third Kapila is described, but Kapila is not so much as God as he's a people. Kapila doesn't perform the Leelas, but instructing his dead. So when we come to the fourth canto, the fourth canto, there are multiple times that loving reciprocation with God. The story that is written. So there's a story of there's a story of where there are many interactions with the Lord, but the three reciprocations are going to start from the seventh canto. So this one explains that among all the avatars, the Paramista avatars, Krishna, Narasimha, and Ram, they have a lot of personal relationships with the Lord. First is Narasimha. And Narasimha always really reciprocated to Prahlad. Sweet. And conversely, outside, how the devotees keep sacrificing more and more for the sake of the Lord. That is described. Now, if you see in the fourth and I will go all of it, but just a quick contrast to illustrate. Understand what is going on. Now, in the fourth canto, how is the dedication seen? Dedication is seen, say, for example, if you're trying to practice bhakti, say people outside us. People outside criticize us, they discriminate against us because we're practicing bhakti. Then, okay, it's a little difficult, the environment is supportive. But if people outside trouble us, people inside trouble us, either family member or this, then it will require a lot more dedication to go. We are trying to practice bhakti and devotees will trouble us. That means there's a conflict between devotees, because of some internal politics or whatever, some devotees trouble us. Then it will become even more difficult to practice. So meditation is seen in terms of how much opposition and what kind of opposition is coming. So, the fourth canto is the story of Briha, in the seventh canto is the story of Prahlad. See, since both of them hurt by their father. It's a technical difference. Is one time hurt by his father, and that is simply respect. You will not respect him. On the other hand, Prahlad, what happens? Prahlad eventually seated his father's lap. What Brahma wanted and was given, Prahlad already had that. Hmm? And what happened is, begging for it, see it, father didn't offer it. Felt insulted by that, went to Lord Vishnu. Consider the situation. He was the inheritor of the kingdom. So it was like there was pain for relief from pain, there was devotion. Seek relief, it is practiced. That is the story of Guru speaking. And still, it is glorious. People live from any prevent anywhere. And devoting himself to Krishna is glorious. But see, Prahlad's story, there is actually good in the loyalty. For him, there is all the devotion. He is not practicing devotion to his own thing. He's first because of his devotion. So now, in such a situation, because they have problems and God forgive me for that. But because of our self-defense problems, that will require a much, much greater dedication. So, so we can the whole happen like this, that how there is a past time, there is an evolution in the reciprocal personal nature of Bhagavan. How does evolution or dedication of the Bhagavan? So, in this talk, I'll focus on the conception of Bhagavan because it's not yet this particular past time. So, this second chapter. Here,
आज मेरे को कॉपी पेंसिल ला दे मेरी काम नहीं करती तू मेरा कॉपी पेंसिल ला दे बाग बाग के लिया ना इतनी जितनी देर होएगी ना उतने में आ भी जाता कॉपी पेंसिल ला दे मेरा कोई भी ला दे
strategy he has. He says, first is that we stop all the yajnas, we stop all the sacrifices.
कोई कभी नहीं लाती है
By that, devas will be good. Saying that,
गंदी लड़की
the other side, with the tapasya, I will gain more and more power.
सुन रही हूँ क्लास
So that I can gain more power.
तो मेरे को मेरी
Destroy
पेंसिल
Vishnu.
और कॉपी ला दे
And when I destroy Vishnu, then that will also be
मैं
destroyed.
क्लास हो रही है मेरी
You see, Vishnu will be and everybody will be destroyed.
चश्मा भी नहीं है तो कुछ काम नहीं करते
He
मेरा
will say, if you look at his further description, he also say that
मेरा कोई काम नहीं करती है
destroy the Vagisthis and execute them.
जमीला रिजल्ट 0 है तो कोई काम नहीं है
Destroy pieces of dharma in his idea is by this you can weaken Vishnu. The idea is if we want to do someone, there are two ways. Either we strengthen ourselves or we weaken the other person. Best way we can do both. We can strengthen ourselves and we can drop it. Chance of winning is the most. So, only speaker, what we say is this is what we will do to destroy Vishnu. That is the context in which these words were spoken. On the inside, I will focus on self and what it implies. Broadly, when we talk about God, there are conceptions of God. A hierarchical conception of God, the other is a categorical conception of God. While the Bhagavatam seems to, on the broad tradition, to talk about these two conceptions of God, some references you should want to both, but one of them is a hierarchical conception of God. It is God is the best of beings. It means there are many beings. There are some more powerful. There are many beings. Part of this hierarchy is God. So there are many devatas. Devatas also have various power. There are Upadevata, there are devatas, but there are devatas. It's a hierarchy of being sits at the top of the hierarchy. God rules at the top of the hierarchy. That is, God is the best of all beings. Now, there are some pointers to this. For example, something says that we humans can have the maximum number of many qualities. And Shiva can have these many qualities. How much is it? We humans can have 80 qualities. Shiva can have 55. Vishnu has 64. Vishnu has 68. Dr. Shiva has 64. So this seems to be a hierarchical conception. where there are greater and greater number of qualities. This is one conception. Other conception is no being. God is not the midst of all beings. There is a hierarchy in which God is at the top. So that God exists in a completely different category. There might be a hierarchy, but God exists in a different category only. But the hierarchy cannot reach God. And God already exists far above everyone else. But God is also subordinate, below in the sense of everyone else. This is, for example, many verses in the Bible say the qualities of the Lord is so many that we might be able to count the sand particles on a beach, the stars in the sky. Be able to count out the qualities of the Lord. Charan says, victories or Narayan Ananta Sampanna. He has infinite qualities. So God exists in a completely different category. If you see these two conceptions, the difference between them is not just a matter of we consider here like a that we consider that in tennis when we are studying there is system of having like 80 so like different have different number of points. Because of how many matches they have won, how many matches they have played, well they have played. So the one player who's seeded number one right now, that person sits at the top of the hierarchy. But if that person doesn't win sufficient matches, and some other player wins more matches. And what happens? The number one will go down. And somebody else will become number one. The idea is that in the hierarchical conception of God, God sits at the top of the hierarchy, but that is just because he has more power than anyone else. Somebody else gets more power than him, and that person will displace God at the top of the hierarchy. This is the hierarchical conception of God. We have the object of describing the Lord as some God. But nobody can be equal to him, nobody can be above him. That indicates that this categorical, this hierarchical conception is wrong. Hiranyakashipu has this hierarchical conception. That's why he's thinking that if I can do more austerity and increase my power, then I can prove that. I can kill God and do God. It's the hierarchical conception. Now, the categorical conception then is God is God exists in a different category of being. So, the section, the chapter especially, the section, Krishna says, Charan, that exist without me. That this is talking about a conception of God. God is not just one being among beings. God is not just many beings. He is the being that sustains all beings. He is the being that doesn't exist. So it is very important that this categorical conception of God is understood. See, if you say the hierarchical conception of Hiranyakashipu. And Allah tries to counter it using this categorical conception. So let's look at a verse in Bhagavatam which illustrates this. So this comes the conversation between Raj and Hiranyakashipu. Where Hiranyakashipu is asking him, where have you got your power? Where the data tremble when I get angry, but you seem fearless. Where have you got this power? And like some tiny kids if Ukraine is standing up to Russia. Where is Ukraine this power? Ukraine is not a very powerful country. So Ukraine gains power from America. It's not a war between Ukraine and Russia, as you say, America and Russia. And right now, America is in 2 weeks. So we support them. Ukraine is anxious. Why do you support us? So the idea is reunification was created. You know, who's backing him? Who's backing him? By the way, he's standing up like this. And what is now Prahlad's reply? We're seeing just speaking. Some shades, some can talk smart. You're talking away and provoking with others. But he's not actually provoking the people. He's provoking the. Let's try to understand this. Let's decide this was. Charajan Pavai Balam Cha Pareshan Hare Hare Sthira Jangamaya Brahmadayo Yena Vashan Pranita he says, now Kevalamde Bhavataschara. This is where are you getting your from? This is where I'm getting my power from. So it's not only I that getting my power. You are also getting the power from the same place. And Savai Balam Balinam Chaparesha. Gives you power. Where are also coming from? Ashes of Balam Balinam Chaparesha. That person is completely transcendental. Sthirajangamaya. Sthirajangamaya is the only higher inferior. Lower higher. Hierarchy is there, but Brahmana the idea is, he seems to be, it's like, where is your power coming from? It says, my power is coming from where your power and even the source of your power is coming from. It's like you are almost agitated person. You are not actually powerful. You have a source of your power. Don't so proud. It's not like that. He's trying to tell him that Vishnu exists in a different category. And he's thinking that Vishnu is your enemy, but later on, so Vishnu is not your enemy. If God had wanted to be our enemy, God would have destroyed us at any moment. You know, if God were against us, we wouldn't exist. No moment. Existence could be long time with God. So he says that the enemy until is guided by. So it's interesting that he uses the word that comes 2 verses later over here. Mm. So make your mind to to okay. That I have conquered the 6 directions. Okay, this verse says, Chayasuram Bhavanidam Tabu. This is the one. Except for the uncontrolled discovered way, yes. Jayasuram Bhavanidam Tabu. But your mind is working against you. And he's saying uncontrolled and misguided. So these 2 adjectives in description, except for the uncontrolled and misguided mind, there is no idea. Uncontrolled means we often have any desires which are not good for us. Misguided means that we think that the universe and the Lord of the universe is against us. And if we want to be happy, there is someone out there who doesn't want us to be happy. And that's why we are unhappy. So in the system, we are actually which actually make us unhappy, make us happy. That's the uncontrolled part of the mind. And the misguided is that we are thinking that when I am trying so much to break happiness, I the universe also. Is there someone out there who doesn't want me to be happy? That's the idea. So this categorical conception of God is what Prahlad is trying to tell Hiranyakashipu. And he's looking, say sometimes, he's out of your that person out of your league. And that means is that you cannot compete with that person. So now, I will get into their league. It's not possible with respect. It's how powerful we become. Actually, whatever now come from God. That's why God exists far above in a different concept. This is one of the main conceptions that we need to clarify to try to counter this. In the West, for much earlier, so last 50 years, when we talk beliefs about the existence of God, especially after 9/11, that was the attacks in America. After that, there's the people level, that's suspicion about Islam. Who was overcome by the allegation of Islamophobia. That criticizing Muslims, suspecting that they're terrorists, you are being Islamophobic. So that trend was pushed back against. But at the intellectual level, there's a strong attack on God itself. That God and religion, that was considered the cause of all problems in the world. So religion is the wrote a book. Another atheist wrote a book. He said that all the bad ideas of the human mind is invented. There's no idea as toxic as the idea of God. So basically, a lot of aggressive criticism. So the first time in India, it's about a month or so ago, it was a big atheist and became quite viral. But this was interesting because like, see, Muslim atheist. So there's a big video. I made a couple of podcasts responding to that also. Also done some things. But the thing is that if you see the concept of God, that both sides are debating. So often the conception itself needs to be understood. So for example, if you will ask, can science by its future advancement discover God? Then God is not like an undiscovered satellite around Jupiter. That means God is not another material object. That future scientific advancement will find something. So the idea is when people approach the idea of God, what is it that what is God? That most people approach God in some conception of hierarchical standing only. The hierarchical understanding is oh, God is the strongest of all beings. God is not just super powerful. That's why the word translated is not the same as super powerful. Powerful is still the hierarchical concept of God. Right? There are multiple powerful, but there is one thing supremely powerful. So, for example, after looking for some after question with Russia, the superpower, America is the supreme power. There are many countries, but America is supremely powerful. God is not just supremely powerful. God is powerful. But we other people who are powerful, all together. So that understanding is the categorical understanding of God. Because if it was not there, the political understanding God exists as the best of all beings. That leads to a lot of confusion. So often the causal question comes up. Causal question is that okay, God created everything, who created God? Now the answer to that question is God exists outside the domain of creation. Like sometimes you have a novel or you have a series where some family or some for many generations characters are talking about. Okay, this person had this father, this grandfather, this person had this child, this daughter, this grandchildren. So, genealogy. And this person came from this person, this person came from this person, this person came from this person. However much we know the genealogy, however much we further trace back, find author in the genealogy. Fourth, we think about Harry Potter's storyline. Harry Potter's genealogy, we are not going to find J.K. Rowling. Why? Because the author exists outside the world of the story. So God exists outside the domain of time and space. We all exist within the domain of time and space. So God exists different category. Philosophical concept. It's already philosophical, but I'll make one more philosophical concept. Come back towards this more simple takeaway. See, with respect to beings, there are two kinds of beings. In English, the word is contingent, potential. So in the Bhagavatam, for example, what is the first verse of the Bhagavatam? Janmadhyasya tanvay tatashartishva abhigya swarat. So swarat. The swarat started as stated as now we often understand the word independent from our context of independent. So what is, for example, say India was a politically dependent country. Now we have become independent. That means our government is not brought about by someone else. Our government comes from ourselves. So that is independence. But in the spiritual sense, when we use contingent means dependent, and if we use swarat as independent. So their independent and dependent is not just meaning that God does not depend on anyone. It actually means that swarat means that, see, if we have a 5-story building, the the 6th story can be built on it. The 6th story may exist or may not exist. Even the 5th story may exist or may not exist. The 3rd story may exist or may not exist. But the ground has to exist, isn't it? If the ground is not there, nothing will exist, isn't it? So all the levels of a building are contingent. Their existence is, in the sense, optional. When contingent means dependent, the swarat, the word is used, their existence itself is optional. Hmm? So the building may be, the entire building may be there, a particular number of stories of the building may be there, nothing might be there. But the ground has to be there. If the ground would not be there, then there would be no building at all, isn't it? So when we talk about being, there has to be a non-optional. So when we talk about existence, there are many, all of us exist. Now, if one of us would not exist, if one of us would die, well, there's some people will lament, grieve our death. But we did not exist. At least we, as we know ourselves in our physical identity, we didn't exist before, and we will not exist after some time. But our existence is contingent. That means if it doesn't exist, the world will still go on. If we don't exist, the world will still go on. And if it and we don't sustain the world. There is an existence which is optional, and there is an existence which is non-optional. That being without whom nothing would exist. That non-optional existence is the existence of God. So this is actually one line of argument for the existence of God. That see, the design argument is a very preliminary argument, and in serious philosophical circles, nobody takes it seriously. Because what happens is that 3 reasons for it. I won't go into all of it. But and it's not that nobody takes it seriously. There are counter arguments also given about it. But it works at a particular level. So the problem with the design arguments are, this is that first is that just because we see design, that does not mean there has to be one designer. There could be many designers, and there could be designers, so it could lead to polytheism. Just because there is design, it could also mean there could be an evil designer, because there is so much pain in the world, And you could say our bodies are designed for pain. There are one organism lives on another organism. One organism literally eats other organisms. So we could say there is the evidence of the design is not of a benevolent divine, benevolent supreme, but a malevolent supreme. Or we could say that it's not a design, it's an illusion of design. That what we think is design has come from natural processes. And that is the argument which mainstream science has accepted through evolution and other things. That actually all that we think is designed has come from natural processes. But the point is that the design argument is not the only argument for the existence of God. So this is there's another argument from the argument for existence. The argument from existence is that if we say something exists right now, a lot of things exist right now, and we see that everything comes from something. We came from somewhere. This building came from somewhere. So now, if we trace it backward, we keep tracing it backward, does it have to stop somewhere? Mhm. So now somebody might say this just goes on and forever. But the problem with that is science does not seem to support that because science has come up with the idea of the Big Bang. Now, interestingly, when the Big Bang theory was first proposed, that was actually very strongly championed by theists and was condemned by atheists because the Big Bang theory was seen as the strongest evidence ever given by science for the existence of God. Why? Because the whole idea of a Big Bang implies that there is a beginner, there is a beginning. And if there is a beginning, there has to be a beginner. So almost all atheistic schools of thought, whether it is Roman atheism or Indian atheism is Buddhism and Jainism, both of them are basically atheistic doctrines. So all of them operate on the idea that the universe is eternal. And the universe is eternal, then there is no need for God. So when science came up with the evidence that the universe is expanding and that it began from a particular point, which is cosmic explosion. So that was seen by many people, mainstream intellectuals, uh, scientists, as undeniable evidence for the existence of God. And that's why atheists vehemently opposed the Big Bang theory. The opposite of the Big Bang theory was the steady state theory. The steady state theory is as the universe is right now, that is how the universe was. So if the universe was always the way it is, then there is no need for a beginning, there is no need for a beginner. And that's why there is no need for a God. So now, once the now see, and whenever any evidence comes up, theists will try to use it, atheists will try to use it. So the atheists came up with the idea that the Big Bang happened without any conscious beginning to it. But the problem with that is not just from a scientific perspective, from a philosophical perspective. See that everything has a beginning. So now, if we are saying that there is a particular point which does not require a beginning, then we are actually so God exists outside the domain of cause and effect. Like I talked about, the author exists outside the genealogy of the characters in the novel. Now, what has happened is science had to propose that what existed before the Big Bang was in a different category. So everything needs a cause, but whatever existed before the Big Bang does not need a cause. So basically, science ended up proposing something transcendental, something which transcends the normal conceptions of space and time and primarily causality, that A leads to B. So now, of course, the current atheistic defense is that the universe is an eternal chain of what they call as big bangs and big crunches. So the universe expands and the universe contracts. And the universe expands and the universe contracts. And that's how it has been going on. And that's how it will go on forever. So it's basically another version of the steady state theory. That now, of course, there is sorry, cyclic theory. So there's current there's if you look at it from a point of view of hard evidence, there is absolutely no evidence of a there have ever been a big crunch that everything compresses and everything falls into itself and gets destroyed. But then their idea is that when everything falls into the big crunch, everything is destroyed, so there'll be no evidence at all. So it's very convenient that you propose a theory for which within the theory itself there is no evidence possible. So, so anyway, if we move from the point of pure logic, that everything exists that has a cause. So now if we trace it backward, either this has to go on forever, or this has to go to some starting point which exists outside in a different category. That every effect has a cause, every cause that also has a cause. Like that, you go backward. Either this has to go on forever, as is called an infinite regress, or if it has to stop, it has to stop in some being that is categorically different. So, the science proposes that the start of the Big Bang, whatever existed, the singularity, is outside in a different category. Or you say that the being in a different category is God. So now, which is a more reasonable explanation? The more reasonable explanation is that we see matter does not have self-organizing properties. If there is just a, if there is a sand pile, the sand pile won't organize itself into a building or into even a sand castle for that matter. If the starting, which exists beyond the domain of cause and effect, if it were either it is conscious or it is insentient. So now the more reasonable explanation is, so basically there are 3 points in this argument. First is that, so everything comes from something. We go backward. Then the something from, so at the start, either everything came from something or everything came from nothing. Now, we don't see anything coming from nothing. So nothing comes from nothing, that's all. So among the two, everything came from something or everything came from nothing. Everything came from something is more reasonable. Now, if everything came from something, now is this something going on and on forever, or does this something stop at a particular point? Now, if it goes on forever, there's no scientific evidence for that. The universe does seem to have a beginning according to science itself. So then, that something has to exist outside the category of cause and effect. Now, that's something from which everything came, which exists outside the cause and effect, like or Anadir Adir Govinda, that which is the causeless cause of all causes. Now, what is more reasonable? Does it that it came from a the starting point was consciousness, or the starting point was matter? Matter does not organize itself. Consciousness organizes itself. Consciousness organizes itself. Consciousness can organize things around itself. Now, say in our philosophy, when we say God existed in the beginning, now God is not just an isolated being. God exists with his energies. So the problem with the idea that God alone existed is that then where did matter come from? The consciousness can organize matter, but can consciousness create matter from nothing? So can God create something from nothing? Well, he can, but even God doesn't have to create something from nothing, because God means God and his energies. So again, this, as long as we are operating within this hierarchical conception of God, again, hierarchical means, oh, there are many beings and God is one being among them, then we will always be vulnerable to being attacked by atheists. So that, oh, some people imagine that this person is God, some people imagine that person is God. Like you people imagine this thing is God. So like that, such people say that, oh, small children in the West believe in Santa Claus, but as they grow up, they stop believing in Santa Claus. So like that, when humanity was in its infant state, it believed in God. As humanity grows up, it should outgrow the belief in God. So the logic is that as long as we think God is just another being among many beings, then we're always prone to attack by atheists. So the categorical conception of God, that God is not just the best of all beings, God is the basis of all beings. So what are the 3 steps? So everything has a cause. Now an argument is as strong as the steps of the argument. So everything has a cause. That's what we observe. And because a cause means everything comes from something. Hmm? Now this is the first step of the argument. Everything comes from something, or everything comes from nothing. So from nothing is not a very sensible argument. Hmm? Now, that something can be within causality. That means within cause effect, or it can be beyond cause effect. If it is within cause effect, then what happens? It only begs the question, where did that come from then? So within cause effect means it leads to what is called as infinite regress. It will lead to endlessly this going on. So this is not acceptable. Something beyond cause effect means that is what? This is the meaning of Swarat. That God is a non-contingent being. God is a being whose existence is not optional. It's essential. What happened? Is Zoom gone now? Zoom is there. Now the third step is, then that something is it insentient or is it sentient? So Prabhupada glorified his spiritual master as absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast removed. So the idea is, if it is insentient, then from there, how does organization happen? We see the world is organized. So organization, how did this happen? So sentient being can organize things. So this understanding of God as a categorically different being is so important, because this actually most of the arguments for atheism come from the conception that God exists within the hierarchy of all other beings. So this is the insight. Now, what is the takeaway for us? The takeaway, there can be many takeaways, but I'll focus on just one theme. That when we talk about this categorical conception of God versus a hierarchical conception of God, that it's very important that always to remember that God is greater than our conception of God. That God is always greater than our conception of God. And we see this dynamic in Arjuna. Arjuna says, after hearing the Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita, which at one level marks the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, at least at conceptual level, Arjuna says, Sarvam etadritam manye yanmam vadasi keshava. He says, I accept everything you say. Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. So at one level, he says, if you see, that he says, you are the supreme being. You are the ultimate reality. He's categorically saying that. And the next verse he says, Sarvam etadritam manye. That I accept everything you say. And yet, in the very next point, he's saying, Nahite Bhagwan Vyaktim Vidur Devana Danava. That actually you cannot be known. That you cannot be known even by the Devatas.
रिकॉर्डिंग होता ना
Then what does it
पर्सनल अलग होता
so
है.
does Arjuna know Krishna or does he not know Krishna? So that is the next verse he says, who can know Krishna? Only Krishna can know Krishna. Swayam evatmanatmanam vitatvam purushottama. That only you can know him, Lord.
लगाना चाहिए.
And then he says, next verse, I want to know more about you. Vaktum arhasya sheshena divyayatma vibhutaya. So this actually, if I understand that God is greater than my conception of God, this will lead to two things. At one level, it will keep us in curiosity. I want to keep learning more. But more importantly, this curiosity will bring humility. One of the biggest problems in religion, when fanaticism comes, That is when people think that my conception of God is the only right conception of God. And anybody who disagrees with my conception of God is not only wrong, is evil. And therefore, that person should be destroyed. But God is far greater than our conception of God. And by extension, this also means that Prabhupada is greater than our conception of Prabhupada. And that is why fanaticism, when it happens in our movement, where, this is what Prabhupada wanted us to do. If you're doing this, you are deviating from Prabhupada. And so many conflicts come up. So to recognize that Prabhupada is greater than our conception of Prabhupada. Because Krishna is all attractive. Now, this does not mean a free for all. Anybody can do anything and say, I am doing this for pleasing Prabhupada. If somebody says, in a temple, we'll start a beef factory, or we'll start a slaughterhouse. And why? That way, people who eat beef will also come to the temple. Well, no. We want people who eat the beef to also come to the temple. We don't have to start a factory in the temple, or a beef, or animal slaughterhouse, we don't have to serve beef in our Govindas. Obviously not. There are boundaries. But those boundaries are far bigger than simply our conceptions. So what happens is when we become we don't have this. See, curiosity and humility is related. Curiosity, how are they related? Humility is that I don't know everything. Curiosity is I want to know more. Hmm? But in one sense, the opposite of this is fanaticism. Fanaticism is I know I am right and I know you are wrong. So there is no humility that maybe I may not be right. There's no curiosity. You're doing something like this. Why are you doing this? What is your thinking about it? So this understanding that God is greater than my conception of God, that means the ways to approach God will be will be different from the ways we approach God. And that's fair enough. So I'll just conclude with one example of this, how our conception of God can actually, if we become too attached to it, that can make us unnecessarily fanatical, unnecessarily confrontational. So we see this that in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's case, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went on his tour of South India, he went down and then he came back up. So he met two Ram Bhaktas. And then two Ram Bhaktas he met. And one of them, on seeing Mahaprabhu, started chanting Hare Krishna. The other was very devoted to Lord Ram, and he was lamenting how could Sita have been touched by Ravana. And Lord Chaitanya got the Matsya Purana, was it Kurma Purana? Kurma Purana, in which it is said that it was Maya Sita it was touched. And he pacified him. And there is no description over there that Mahaprabhu did this service so that he would make that Ram Bhakta into Krishna Bhakta. That Ram Bhakta stayed a Ram Bhakta. So Mahaprabhu appreciated that actually, yes, we worship Krishna and we are attracted to Krishna. And if by associating with you become attracted to Krishna, that's wonderful. But if not, you are attracted to another manifestation of divinity, then it's not my business to prove that you are wrong. Even in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Sanatana Goswami goes, when he goes to Vaikuntha, there all the residents think that Vishnu is the source of all incarnations. And Jiva Goswami doesn't feel the need to put in brackets, but actually they're wrong. Huh? They're in Maya. Or when he goes to he goes to Ayodhya, actually the Ayodhya Vasis think that Ram is the source of all incarnations. Yes, there are many Vishnu manifestations, but Ram is the greatest. Again, he doesn't feel insecure. Oh, but they're wrong. So what happens is that once we understand that, yes, there is a philosophical reality of Krishna, but there is also a personal reality of Krishna. And the personal reality means that Krishna can attract different persons in different ways. So that understanding. So in our tradition, one of the things is that God Himself has many different manifestations. So Advaitam, they're not different. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. So the Advaitam aspect is not impersonal. Advaitam means that there is one non-dual ultimate reality, but that also has many forms. So God is greater than our conception of God. And that's why when we see, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that if we go to a place of worship of some other religion, hmm, then what should be our mood? That we should be thinking that my Lord, my God, my Lord has manifested here in a different way. Because of my particular conception, I cannot exactly understand how it manifested. But he's attracting these people towards him, and seeing how compassionate my Lord is to attract these people in this way, my devotion to the Lord as I know him is increasing. So yes, Krishna can attract people through the different Vaishnava traditions. Krishna can attract people through different Vedic traditions. Krishna can attract people through different non-Vedic traditions. The same one God. And God is greater than our conception of God. So if I am here, I'm going up a mountain peak. And here at the peak, at the top is God. Hmm? So now I have got a peak of the peak. Peak of the peak means I got a glimpse of what is at the top. And my glimpse is real. But somebody else is going up from here, they have got a different peak. They have got a different glimpse. The same ultimate reality, but that ultimate reality is so great that I don't really know it fully. Even if we get to the peak, still it's so vast. It's like an ocean. We can know what the ocean tastes like, what it feels like to be in the ocean, but you cannot say, I know the full ocean. So that's why there has to be a certain level of humility. And that there is always more to know about God. There's always more to know about how God attracts people in this world. So I want to be committed to my path to God. But at the same time, my commitment does not have to lead to intolerance. My commitment does not have to lead to fanaticism. This is the way I'm going up the mountain. There are others who may be going by another way up the mountain. Now, of course, this doesn't again mean that always go up the mountain. Some ways might just go round and round the mountain also. Isn't it? Somebody might not be going up the mountain at all. Somebody might be going into the valley away from the mountain. So this is not relativism where, oh, whatever you want to believe, you can believe. No, Prabhupada had objective criteria. What is objective criteria? He said, we consider Jesus to be our guru. Why? Because he had so much love for God that he was ready to sacrifice his own life for the sake of God. So bhakti paresha anubhava virakti ranyatracha. If a road is taking me up the mountain, there are objective criteria for that. What is that? I should be going closer to the peak of the mountain and I should be going further from the bottom of the mountain. Like that, if a path is taking us closer to God, the objective criteria is that our love for God should be increasing and our infatuation with material things should be decreasing. If these two are happening, some way people are approaching God. Their conception of God may be different from ours, but we don't focus on that. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. Three main points. We're discussing about basically understanding or expanding our conception of God. That was the topic. So I started by the context. How, in the context of the Bhagavatam has its own evolution. That evolution is both in the conception of Bhagavan and in the dedication of the Bhakta. So we contrasted how there's more intimacy in the seventh canto, Narsimha Leela, than say in the Varaha Leela or some other Leelas of the Lord. Similarly, we contrasted Prahlad's dedication is both are great devotees, but Prahlad is tested far more. Dhruva goes to God because of his pain to gain relief. Prahlad experiences pain because of his going to God, his devotion. Then, in terms of insight, that's where we spend the maximum time. We talked about God as a categorical, as a hierarchical conception. That is, God is the greatest of all beings, the best of all beings. And then categorical conception is God is the basis of all being. So we discussed how Hiranyakashipu has this hierarchical conception, and Prahalad, when he seems to provoke Hiranyakashipu, he's not provoking him, he's educating him. When he's saying that actually God exists in a different category. And this categorical conception of God, what does this mean? That God is the non-contingent being. Contingent means dependent, but it's not dependent in the sense of like political dependence, independence. It's that non-contingent means God's existence is not optional. God's existence is essential. And then we discussed about the what is called something the cosmological argument for the existence of God. That if we go backwards, so everything has to come from something, not nothing. And that something has to be conscious. So that's how we can come to the idea of the existence of God. And then the takeaway for us from this was that we always understand that God is greater than my conception of God. So each of us, Krishna has revealed ourselves himself to us in a particular way. We are trying to go up the mountain, and we have got what is at the peak of the mountain. This is God. So as we are trying to move up this mountain, we have got a peak of that peak. But still, it's only a peak. And there will be that if I understand my concept, God is always greater than my conception of God. The result of this would be, at one level, curiosity. I want to know more, and that is associated with humility, non different from humility. Means I don't know everything. And this curiosity with humility combined is one of the best antidotes for fanaticism. Fanaticism is where I think I know that I am right and you are wrong. So this humility can help us. The curiosity and humility, it does not mean relativism. We are not saying that everything goes in the name of everybody has their conceptions of God. There are objective criteria. Are we actually becoming more attached to God? And are we become more detached from material things? That is evidence that we are going up the peak of up towards the peak of the mountain. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any quick questions? Yes, Prabhu.
But if we see the creation, after the time that Lord distributes the leaves like this, it will come. The scientific also will require us to be beyond the positive. Can we say like you will take the practice today?
Okay.
Totally not practice today. The practice really also requires us beyond positive to operate.
Okay. Yeah. So, see, does the cyclic theory actually come closer to the Vedic understanding? Well, trying to look for parallels in science and spirituality is can be a fascinating exercise, and we have to understand both what are the similarities, but what also the dissimilarities. So the thing is, see, one of the fundamental operational assumptions, which is considered like if science does not believe in God, but this is considered one of the most sacred assumptions of science. And what is sacred assumption of science? That they call it as methodological naturalism. Methodological naturalism means that all natural explanations, all natural phenomena, we will look for natural explanations for those phenomena. So, for example, when Newton saw the apple falling or felt the apple falling, whichever way it was, now Newton believed in God, but when he wanted to know what made the apple fall, he was not looking for, oh, God made the apple fall. He was looking for a mechanism for explaining it. So, yeah. So one of the operational assumptions of science is that we will not bring in any supernatural explanations for any natural phenomena. And their argument is that bringing in supernatural explanations is a progress stopper. That they said that, for example, when the Black Plague was there, Black Plague was a big, like, pandemic kind of thing in Europe, which killed almost one third of the Europe population. So some people said this is caused by some evil spirits and ghosts. So the scientific argument is we didn't believe in that. And that's how we discovered germs. And that's how we came up with treatment. So their idea is that as soon as God gets a step into the house of science, the progress of science stops. So because what happens is, so science by its methodology looks for mechanisms. And now this is not a wrong argument. It's not an incorrect argument, it's an incomplete argument. So what happens is, any event that happens, if this is an event, this is a mechanical explanation. Sadaput Pro is one of the most brilliant scientists in our movement. He wrote a book called Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science. So science looks for mechanical explanations. And now, while looking for mechanical explanations, some things may not have a mechanical explanation. Or at least science has not yet found a mechanical explanation for that. So then what happens? This is where often religious people come in and say, see, this has no mechanical explanation, therefore there should be God. Now, the problem with this is that this is what atheists mock as the God of the gaps. God of the gaps means whatever science can't explain, that's the hiding place of God. And once science keeps explaining things, then God will have no hiding place. And therefore, God will be banished out of existence. So, sometimes we use this God of the gaps argument. So, God is not the explanation for the unexplainable. That's how we try to present it. You can't explain this, therefore, there has to be God. But what we understand, if we understand our philosophy properly, is God is not the explanation for the unexplainable. Because the problem with this is, as scientific advancement happens, as we explain more and more things, then that space for God is lost. Actually, God is the explanation for explainability. What do I mean by explanation for explainability? That it is not that, say, Om Purnam Adaha Purnamidam. So methodological naturalism is not wrong. Krishna has made this world to be complete in itself. So the phenomena in this world can be explained through other phenomena in this world. That's Krishna's arrangement. Maya adhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. But after that, hetu anena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. So jagat viparivartate is not happening because Maya. It is happening because hetu anena. What Krishna is saying is, the cause-effect phenomena of the world is supervised by me. Krishna is not saying I am the cause-effect phenomena. So what is happening is, when we bring in God as the explanation for the unexplainable, we are bringing in God as one cause among the many causes of the world. So we are actually making God non-transcendental. When we start saying that God has made the design of the world. See, sometimes we use these two arguments. The one argument is the design requires a designer and law requires a lawmaker. Actually, these two are opposite arguments. And the second argument is used by atheists to refute the first argument. That what it means that, say, design requires a designer. But if a law exists, say, if I can write an algorithm by which you put clay in a particular machine and that clay is pressed in such a way that you get a pot of this design, then the design of that pot has not come from a designer. The design of that pot has come from an algorithm. Now, we may say algorithm requires an algorithm maker. That's true. But the point is, the design has not come from a designer. The design has come from an algorithm. So when we say that a beautiful rose, where has this design come from? It has come from a seed. It has not. It is not that God has personally designed the rose. There's a mechanical process by which it is designed. So when we use God as the explanation for the unexplainable, what are we doing is, we are making God as a material cause. But when science finds a material cause for something, then there's no room left for God. So what we are saying is that this whole phenomena of cause and effect. So just try to conclude this reasoning that, okay, the design in this world comes from laws. It does not come from a designer. Then the question comes, where do the laws come from? And this is a different question. So our philosophy does not say that the designs of this world comes immediately from a designer. It ultimately, there's a difference between the two. So the design argument is valid. It's not a wrong argument, but it has to be very carefully understood. So there is so much in our philosophy which says that God doesn't touch the material world. The material world doesn't touch God. That God is transcendental. And yet, how can we say that the things in this world are made by God? If God is if he's really transcendental, we cannot have it both ways. That, oh, God is completely transcendental to the world and everything in this world is made by God. No, if God is transcendental, he's transcendental. So now he has made a system. So there's two different things over here. The design comes from a system. So science is looking for the system. Science is looking for the mechanism. So Laplace was a famous scientist, and he presented his book about to the French king. And he said, so where is God in your hypothesis? And Laplace said, I have no need for God. I have no need for that hypothesis. So Krishna has made this world in such a way that people can explain this world in terms of mechanisms. Now the question is, where did these mechanisms come from? So the difference is, where did the design come from? The design came from mechanisms. Now, where did these mechanisms come from? Now, with this, so that is, mechanism means the laws of nature. So now Newton considered that the laws of nature, for example, Newton's laws of physics, they have come from God. Now, modern atheists, modern scientists or atheists, they say that the laws are inherent to matter. Now we may say, how are the laws inherent to matter? So the atheist argument is that how does God bring laws into existence? How matter has laws? Both of those are, they're just, we all have to have some starting assumption. We start from that starting assumption. Now the thing is that the explanation for explainability is another argument called the argument from meaning. And among all arguments, I find this the most powerful argument. And until now, I have not seen any satisfactory atheistic refutation of this. I mean, what is this argument? That say there is our mind. Mind means our inner capacity to analyze, process, and there is the world. So now the mind tries to seek a understanding, seek explanations. And the world seems to be explainable. Now, Einstein has said that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. What he meant by that is, see, if the universe has evolved by random unguided processes, and our mind has evolved by random unguided processes, then why should the universe be working according to laws of mathematical precision involving concepts that our mind has come up with? Say, for example, there is no such thing as a square root existing in nature. There is no such thing as an imaginary number existing in nature. There is no such thing as the calculus existing in nature. And so all of these are concepts thought of by the human mind. And yet these concepts, which are thought of by the human mind, they explain how nature works. They can be used to explain how nature works. And it's a fairly good explanation. It may not be exhaustive explanation, but it's a fairly accurate explanation. So Eugene Wigner is a Nobel laureate scientist. He wrote a very famous paper called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in Explaining Nature. So maths, or many of the mathematical concepts, are creations of the human mind. Now, why should creations of the human mind be able to, why should nature be working according to concepts that are creations of the human mind? So the only reasonable explanation for this is that both the human mind and nature are coming from a higher intelligence. That higher intelligence has shaped nature, that higher intelligence has shaped the human mind. And that's how, now this is not the design argument. The design argument is specific design has come from God. But what we are saying here is the explainability. That so this argument does not put God in opposition to science. It puts God as the foundation for science. That science begins with the understanding that nature is explainable. That when Newton, that apple fell on him, Newton did not think that apples fall by chance. He thought that there is some mechanism, there is some ordering principle, and I want to understand that principle. So now, if we take this explanation, then science is no longer a progress stopper for scientific. Sorry, God is no longer a progress stopper. Because what they say is, as soon as you bring God as one of the explanations for one phenomena, then what happens? Then we stop investigating because God did it. We can't find any mechanisms. But what this particular understanding, God as the explanation for explainability, that says that because God has created this universe, ultimately, or rather, let's not say God has created the universe, more precisely, God is the source or the sustainer of the mechanisms by which the universe operates. Therefore, we should explore the mechanisms because the universe is having a governing intelligence underlying it. So this vision actually stimulates scientific curiosity and scientific progress, but it does not put science and God in competition. So that's why when we say that God designed something in this world, what we are saying is we are making God into a material force, into a material agent. But so coming back to your specific point about the cyclic. So the thing is, I started with point saying that there's methodological naturalism, which says that science will not consider any non-material explanation. And that is okay. That is the way science works. But should science consider not just what is the mechanical explanation, but why does the mechanical explanation exist at all? There's a different explanation. What or how does this thing work? But why does this thing exist and why does it work according to a mechanism? So when we separate the how question and the why question, that so science can go on exploring the how question, and spirituality need not feel threatened by the exploration of the how question. Mhm. But we understand spirituality is addressing the why question. And that's why, say, can future AI become conscious? See, I have no problem with that. My faith is not threatened by it. Why not? Because I understand that the soul, now I'm not saying AI will become conscious, but my faith does not depend on having to prove for all future iterations of AI that they're never conscious. Why? Because, see, the soul is different from matter, and the soul can manifest in any suitable matter. So the soul needs this. If the soul is really transcendental, if the soul is well and truly transcendental, does the soul necessarily need only a biological medium to manifest? Can the soul not manifest through a digital medium? Can we say that it's not possible? So if AI becomes conscious, that means somewhere in the process, a soul has come into the picture. So the consciousness of AI does not prove that consciousness comes from matter. The consciousness of AI will prove that somewhere along the way, a soul has come in. There are, in our own tradition, there are many, many ways in which the soul comes in. That there is, it comes from eggs, it comes from wombs, it comes from sweat. There, yeah, yeah, exactly. So there are many, many ways in which consciousness can manifest. So now among all these various processes, so there are some cases of some sages, they just drop some semen and then that semen goes somewhere and then it gets united. So in that particular case, where exactly the soul coming from? No, there are many, many examples of the soul coming from multiple channels into the body. So in that sense, so see, this is the last point I'll make about this. See, as long as we think of God as the explanation for the unexplainable, then our faith will always be very insecure. So tomorrow, if science explains this, then will my faith be false? But if we see that God is the explanation for explainability, we need not ever feel threatened by scientific progress. So, can scientists in future make artificial life? Artificial life means what? That they take some cells and they harvest the cells and they make it into life. Well, if they make life, it is not artificial. It is spiritual. They may use a particular mechanism. They may use a particular mechanism for making it. But if scientists succeed in the laboratory in creating a suitable biological medium, it's like nature creates a particular biological medium in the mother's womb. If scientists succeed in creating a particular biological medium, then in that, if a soul manifests, no, can we say the soul cannot manifest there? No. The soul is truly transcendental. Nainam Chandandi Shastrani Namandati Pavaka. The soul can manifest to anywhere. So again, I'm not saying that AI is conscious. I'm not saying that in a lab, scientists will be able to make life. So Prabhupada's theory was not that life can't come in a laboratory. Prabhupada said life comes from life. So now, can the medium for life coming be a laboratory? That's not a problem for us. So that's why this understanding, so the cyclic understanding. So going back to your particular question, the cyclic understanding, does it require a person? Yes. Philosophically speaking, yes. Scientifically speaking, science is not concerned about that. That's why there are honest scientists who say that what we operate on is methodological naturalism, not metaphysical naturalism. So methodology means as a matter of method, this is what we are looking for. Now there are atheists who jump from metaphorical naturalism, methodological naturalism to metaphysical naturalism. That means they say this is the only explanation. That there is no explanation beyond this. Now what we say is there is this explanation, but there can be another explanation also. Like Newton, he believed in gravity, he postulated gravity, but he also believed in God. So the Newton's belief in God did not require him to reject gravity. And his belief in gravity did not require him to reject God. But can scientific evidence point to this, or can science, by its future research, come up with this metaphysical explanation? Well, no, because our own philosophy says God is not material, and science studies material reality. So in trying to be so anxious to prove the existence of God, we are actually watering down our own conception of God. By trying to find material evidence for the existence of God, we end up having to make God material. God is a spiritual being. And that's why, yes, the cyclic theory will require God. But that requirement of God is a philosophical requirement. It's not a scientific requirement. And at the philosophical level, okay, where did the cyclic system go on? So science, it is only some scientists who are, because they're overconfident or atheistic, they say science provides all answers. But technically speaking, or more precisely speaking, science answers how things work. Why things exist is the question of philosophy. That is not the question that science addresses. Now, there are some scientists who claim we can explain why things exist also. But those scientists, that is not the mainstream scientific understanding, and that is not the opinion of most scientists also. That's why most scientists are not atheists. They are not atheistic, they are non-theistic. Non-theistic means God does not picture in our explanation. That does not mean that we say God doesn't exist. And God not picturing in the explanation is not a problem. It is that there is a causal mechanism, and we try to understand the causal mechanism. And we also understand that causal mechanism comes from God. But that is a philosophical understanding. That's not a scientific understanding. Okay?
So there's a need of philosophy, not just.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why, there is especially that from 2000 to around 2010, there has been this something called a science wars. Science wars basically between scientists and philosophers of science. See, philosophy of a science is a philosophical field. And philosophy of science asks the bigger questions about science. And philosophers of science are often much more open to theism than scientists themselves. Because once you start asking the bigger questions, then that's why, how scientists define science is important to understand. That's why if people ask, what is the scientific proof that chanting works? You don't need a scientific proof. By saying you need a scientific proof, you are giving science monopoly on all bodies of knowledge. It's like saying, what is the scientific proof that my mother loves me? Now, what scientific proof are you going to provide? Like you put some meter on a mother's heart and see love meter. How much love is there? Why should we need scientific proof for things which are matters of experience for us? So neither should scientists claim more for science as a domain than what is its domain, and nor should we give more domain to science. Science has its domain, and spirituality has its domain. Now, when Prabhupada uses the word science or uses the word science of Krishna consciousness, he's using it not in the sense scientists use it. He's using it like a systematic body of knowledge. Now, that is one aspect of science, but that is not the only aspect of science. So, well, not just experimental. The science has 4 or 5 different criteria. One of them is it conducts experiment, and one of them is repeatability. One of them is like repeatability or verifiability. But another of them is that this methodological naturalism. So Prabhupada doesn't address that. So that's why whether spirituality is a science. And on my website, The Spiritual Scientist, now I have an elaborate question answer, an article about what do I mean when I use the word spiritual scientist. So I'm talking that I use the word science in a more inclusive sense, not in the specific sense. So I'm not claiming that I am a scientist in the sense of the mainstream conception of science. I'm saying that my approach to spirituality is scientific. It's rational. It's not mystical. But that's why I'm not claiming that one devotee told me you should use the word the scientific spiritualist, not spiritual scientist. I said, yeah, no, I can't change the name of the site, but scientific spiritualist would actually be better. Yes, spiritualist, and we have a scientific approach to spirituality. But actually, I did not choose that name. That magazine had been named before me by others, and I simply carried on that. So, but I think it's a technical difference, and as long as we explain this, in what sense we are using the word, that is not a big issue. Okay. So thank you. I think should we talk one to one? It's been quite a long time. Okay. Any of you have questions? We'll talk one to one. Thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada ki, Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Very grateful for this and for getting so many programs yesterday. Specifically, I can see the Bhagavatam. Today, it's so wonderful on the concept of theism and atheism. So many concepts written. That's anything as anything like this is how